know that you are the expert in your story is really, really essential. The emotional aspects of a story, the personal aspects of the story are compelling, and because they are yours. Like nobody can change what has happened to you. Your, your truth is your own, and that's really important to remember when you are interacting with people who might not feel the same way as you or might not even believe you. Just know that like your truth is what happened to you. So focusing on those aspects and kind of just reiterating that can be a powerful tool.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 outreach webinar hosted by US WIN Communications Committee. My name is Selena Smith. I am a member of US WIN ComCom, as we like to call it, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us for this webinar. The purpose of our outreach webinar is to inspire and empower WIN members to advocate for yourselves and also for the nuclear energy and technology industry in general. So I'm very pleased that to everyone who has showed up for this webinar. In the chat in just a minute, I'll be posting a storytelling worksheet. This is a kind of an aid to help you craft your story. So when that comes up in the chat, feel free to download that to help you develop your story. And then this webinar is going to be recorded and it will be shared most likely on our YouTube and in a Winning Edge article after the webinar. So without further ado, the topic of our story today is Storytelling 101. It's kind of a training of sorts, and it's to help you craft a thrilling story that can help you persuade others. My esteemed colleague, Corinne Mamarella, has agreed to host this webinar. Corinne Mamarella is the volunteer coordinator and organizer at Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, where she works to garner supporters and volunteers. She studied cultural anthropology at the University of Pittsburgh. Corinne relaunched the Storyteller program for her organization, which I am happy to support. And she helps to onboard new storytellers who'd like to harness the power of their voice. Corinne is also a storyteller herself, and she's a storyteller with I Have a Right To, which is an organization that works to create networks of support for students and survivors of sexual assault. And so that is definitely shared in the description on our website, but I can also share a link to that organization in the chat. So without further ado, Corinne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Selena, and thanks everyone for being here. Super excited to get started. Yeah, thanks for joining our training here, Storytelling 101, brought to you by Planned Parenthood Pennsylvania Advocates, tailored to the WIN group a bit. But yeah, you can go to the next slide. Like Selena said, I'm Corinne. I use she, her pronouns. I've been with our organization, Planned Parenthood of Western PA, for about 3.5 years, training and managing storytellers and volunteers. And yeah, it's shown me that storytelling is really the backbone of so much advocacy work, at all levels of advocacy work. So it's an extremely powerful tool, and I'm happy to share some of those tips with you guys. If you'd like to check out Planned Parenthood volunteer opportunities at all, feel free to check out the Planned Parenthood Federation of America website. Yeah, thank you. So today we are going to go over what a story is, discovering the elements of a story, why are stories important. Stories are important through this thing called the head and the heart. We'll get into that, how to craft your story, the various elements, tips for sharing your story, and then a call to action at the end. By the end of the training, you should know why stories are important for advocacy work, how to craft your personal narrative to have an impact, and how to share your story. Okay, so when we talk about stories, we're referring to personal narratives that delve into why a certain issue matters to you and why they should matter to others. Your story can touch on so many different aspects of yourself, um, your inspiration, your experiences, your thoughts about the movement, or your vision for the future. So it can be, what ignited your passion, your experiences, in your organization, in your line of work, memories that you have, instances where you've previously advocated, and pretty much anything you want it to be. That's the fun part is there's so much creativity that goes into your story. Stories aren't just for personal experiences. They're just powerful tools for building movement. We're here to equip you with the skills to craft your own narrative, but your narrative is your own. And harnessing like what you want to say in a compelling way is a really, really, it can be a really awesome exercise for people. So stories are important to advocacy work. They're very vital to our cause at Planned Parenthood, but they're pretty much vital to any course of advocacy. Um, they show how certain things resonate with others. They show the diversity within experiences within a movement. And storytelling is important because they're remembered more than facts alone. According to Planned Parenthood study, they're remembered 22 times more than simply facts alone. So traditional advocacy includes, statistics broadly. So data-driven arguments, and it appeals to the rational kind of side of our brain. Um, However, it can be kind of easily forgettable. Whereas storytelling is something that is engaging intellectually and emotionally, appeals to humanity and our empathy to persuade, and is memorable and inspiring. So storytelling is kind of becomes important through this binary called the head and the heart. So we navigate the world through two lenses, our head and our heart. Our rational mind seeks logic and analysis to understand our surroundings, emphasizing the importance of presenting tangible evidence that resonates with our logical faculties in our brain. But what is equally crucial is the emotional dimension. Our heart is the seat of our emotions, it propels motivation. So through however we can, convey our heart to people, whether that's through humor, imagery, relatable anecdotes, emotions are what ignite action. So consider this when we listen to a PowerPoint presentation that we would consider mundane, we're considering it mundane because only certain parts of our brain are engaged, mainly like the language processing centers. But when we're immersed in a story, a news story that has various elements, our entire brain lights up, and it's kind of as if we're experiencing the story firsthand. It's a really awesome phenomenon. So whether it's a detailed description of a delicious food that you've never had before, or a description of an environment that you've never been in, that's what connects us to the narrative. So to truly make an impact, to get people to care about what you're talking about, both the head and the heart need to be activated. Um, that's how we kind of show people where you are and why they should care. So, with that being said, we are now going to hear a story. And I'd like you, while you're listening, to think about not only, maybe the statistics that are being shared with it, but that heart element, like what emotions are being conveyed. And yeah, what are you taking away from it?
The world succeeded in making over 400 nuclear reactors that generate clean electricity. Nuclear energy, it is advantageous in that it can generate electricity.
Okay, so that was like a short little story, but it contained a lot of, facts mixed with like kind of emotions and descriptors, like motivating people to care. So, from the story, what do you remember? What made you care? You can kind of bring this into a lot of times that you're just like even simply listening to people talk. I'm sure that many of you WIN members interact with each other and share like your motivation with each other. So when you're doing that and when you're working on crafting your story, being an active listener when you're hearing stories can really, help you create your own. So yeah, just think about the things that you remember from stories and why you care about them. Feel free to jot it down as well. So now we're kind of getting into the meat of it. So what are the elements of a story? We break it down at Planned Parenthood into 4 sections. So we have the challenge, choice, outcome, and ask. This is I found it as a really awesome tool to like take what can be, what can seem like a complex story in one's mind and give it like kind of a formula that makes it a bit more attainable, especially when you're initially starting to craft your story, like in the brainstorming process. So, a challenge is an endeavor you willingly pursued, a hurdle you overcame, choice, a decision you made or were forced to make. Outcome is the result and impact of the choice. And the ask is what action do you want people to take after hearing your story? We're going to go into these a little more next. So first, let's talk about a challenge that you might have encountered. While the term challenge might invoke thoughts of like dramatic hardships, it's important to recognize that struggles come in various forms. A challenge could be a personal endeavor that you willingly pursued or a hurdle you overcame. We like to say a mountain you chose to climb or a valley you managed to emerge from. So when you're thinking about your story, it's helpful to start with the challenge. Doesn't need to necessarily have a super negative connotation in your brain, but what was something significant that's kind of pops out to you in your journey? So what was the challenge? Why did you perceive it as a challenge? How did it make you feel? And why do you think it became your challenge? Next, we're going to move into choice. So the choice is a decision you made in response to the challenge you faced. So, why did you opt for this particular choice as a result of the challenge? What motivated that decision? Did you draw courage or hope from any source? And how did you emotionally experience this decision? This decision doesn't have to be something that's monumental. It can simply be a course of action that you took. And with that, even small courses of action hold weight. Courses of action might not seem super significant to you, but you all decided to join WIN, Women in Nuclear, so that's why we're all here together. That's how the group formed, and now we have 92 participants on a Zoom call. That all was, you all chose to be here to do that, and that while you might not feel like your courses of action hold significant weight in your mind, they are all tangible and can help movement build. So now we're going to delve into the third part, the outcome. So what resulted from the choice that you made? How did the outcome make you feel? What experience did you have when you were, after your choice that you made? What lessons did you learn from this experience? What message do you wish to convey to others through your story? And yeah, how do you hope that your audience will feel after hearing the challenge and choice that you made? So lastly, to catalyze action, we're concluding our stories with an ask. The asks are definitely dependent on kind of like where you're at in your advocacy journey and what specific engagement you're participating in. But basically, what action do you wish others would take after hearing your story? Like in your ideal world, I think that's a really good place to start. Will you encourage them to volunteer, donate, engage with legislators? Do you want them to become part of the movement? Do you want them to care? Do you want them to amplify your story? You might need to check in with, fellow win members or like somebody who's kind of spearheading whatever engagement you're participating in, to see if your ask is relevant to the context. But I think, when you're first starting to brainstorm, just thinking of like what your ideal ask would be, from folks hearing your story is a really good place to start. So now that we kind of went over the structure, we can talk about some tips and best practices to enhance a story's impact. So first, we don't want to shy away, if it's comfortable, from sharing tangible and specific details. So what thoughts race through your mind? How did you feel? These details really resonate with others. They can infuse your narrative with authenticity and, just a personal aspect. You can even consider weaving in details like maybe a room that you were in when you had a light bulb moment, or the scenery in a car ride that were reflecting on a certain situation that happened, or maybe there was, a dull conference room at your first meeting in a certain uh, scenario. The details are what can really take people into your world, into your narrative, and get them to pay attention, keep them, just keep them engaged. And secondly, keeping it conversational can really, really help with that engagement piece. As much as you can, be yourself as if you're chatting with a friend. That can also come through not just when you're having conversations or speaking aloud. I think that it's important to start writing your story as if it's something conversational. Your story doesn't need to be performative. Authenticity really can help convey something that feels genuine to other people. So this is what really, really can make stories resonate with folks. And know your audience. You might not be talking to people who know about nuclear energy. I know I am definitely one of those people who you'd have to tailor your stories to, likely. So act like you're describing these issues to someone who doesn't know anything about nuclear energy, or specifically doesn't know much about why women in nuclear should be something that other people care about, like why it is such an awesome organization. It's not necessarily implied for everybody that you're going to be talking to. So knowing your audience is really, really important when you take your story to that next level of, maybe you're just writing your story the first time, but then you decide to engage in a certain opportunity with your story. Before you decide to engage in an opportunity, it's really, really important that you check in about like who your audience is going to be specifically. So when you're brainstorming your story, it does not have to be perfect by any means. In fact, loose and messy is almost better here. Don't shy away from having your brainstorming sessions be kind of like a stream of consciousness. It doesn't even have to feel good or comfortable in your first, initial thoughts about your story. So what can really help here is, I know that sometimes people parameters help people get creative. So that's where I find that the challenge, choice, outcome, and ask formula can really come in handy, because you're kind of like answering prompts. And while you're doing that, feel free to get as messy as you can. So you'll start by jotting down past challenges you faced. And then for each challenge, you can outline the choice you made in response. Again, it doesn't have to be a monumental decision. Even small choices are valuable here. Try to think of everything that's coming to your mind as something that's significant. Next, you'll reflect on the outcomes of these choices. So did your decisions lead to new opportunities, boost your self-esteem, or enable you to pursue something that you never thought was possible? Think about your trajectory and how that has changed as a result of your choices. Um, you'll kind of realize that the through lines will be able to pop up more naturally when you are allowing yourself to just kind of freely write. Um, and then, yeah, of course, the ask here is something that might be different depending on where you're at, what you're crafting your narrative for. But a clear request here is something that can be pretty impactful. So, yeah, just being direct in your ask, I think, is great. But of course, it doesn't necessarily always start out as something that is very clear. But when you're kind of reflecting on why all of this matters to you, I think your ask can then become more refined. So when you're focusing on the four elements, make sure you leave. When you're focusing on the four elements, make sure you're leaving room for the details and emotions that come through. It's good to like also record those. You can do that separately or kind of like in the same space that you're recording the four elements, but just kind of be intentional in leaving room for those details and emotions, because then again, that's like kind of what gets people to care and can really enhance your story. So after you have your little brainstorm session, then we suggest moving into drafting. I definitely understand that everybody has their own process of writing specifically. So definitely like, honor that and, go with whatever can help you get your thoughts down. But we also find that drafting and kind of chunking time spent on working on your story can be very, very helpful. So you might find that you have multiple challenges that will, probably have multiple choices, outcomes, and asks. So you might feel like you have multiple stories, or you might feel like all of these stories can go together, but you're not sure how. This is where drafting and chunking your time spent on your story can be really, really helpful. It can be kind of overwhelming when you think of everything that led you to be passionate about a certain cause. There can be multiple things, or there could be one thing that clearly sticks out to you. But in the drafting stage, you are then taking the challenge, choice, outcome, and ask and kind of melding them together in a way that, feels like it's honoring you. So you're just kind of putting them together in your own words. So what can be really helpful is kind of drafting out each story that you have, or if you're doing multiple, challenges, kind of going one by one with the challenges, and then finding those natural intersections of like maybe where you're repeating yourself. And that's where you can find the areas to kind of combine them and interweave them. Similarly, you might really take well to advocacy work and advocating for this cause. And it's better to have more to go off of than less. So maybe you are crafting your story for one opportunity that you feel doesn't need every single aspect of, your inspiration for joining WIN. But maybe down the road, you feel like you need more details, more information, more examples of why this cause matters to you. You can go back then to those initial challenges that you wrote down and pull them. You can tailor your story to different contexts when you have done this deep brainstorming and you have a lot of things to pull from. So yeah, you can also use your story not just for, of course, formal engagements. Stories can be used for when you're having, day-to-day conversations with people. If you need to do an elevator pitch, brief interactions, maybe you're posting on social media about why somebody should sign a petition or something like that. You can then go back and pull from those challenges and, the choices, outcomes, and asks that you've brainstormed with and kind of puzzle them together for your specific opportunities. So the brainstorm can be like throwing anything at the wall, but then the drafting process kind of puts them together more and is really helpful kind of when you know your audience and you know the specific engagement that you're looking to participate in. If you're looking to publicly share your story and you're really preparing for a specific opportunity, phone a friend. I love getting feedback from my peers, from my colleagues when I'm going to advocate, because, we are all in community together. We all have different areas of expertise. So if you're looking for your story to be impactful, who better to go to than, the people around you? So consulting your friends in this organization can be really, really helpful. Similarly, we're focusing a lot on the emotional aspects of sharing your story, but you all might want to also interweave some of those statistics. So make sure you're just like fact checking all of that information, of course, before, your story goes live. So when you're crafting your story, it's really great to leave time and space for reflection. So you might be drafting your story and you might need a break or you might hit a wall. You might get stuck. You might have certain emotions that come up. You can always feel free to go back to square one, the formula, challenge, choice, outcome, ask, and do some brainstorming again. It doesn't need to be like a perfect brainstorming, then drafting, then you're good to go. You can always go back to square one. You can always, refine your drafts, create multiple drafts until you feel content. The worksheet that Selena sent is, some guidance to get started here with the brainstorming session. If you'd like, but you can also, journal, you can use bullet points, you can seek out other stories as examples, pull from those stories what you like and what you don't like. But I will say when you are doing any aspect of crafting your story, so brainstorming, drafting, getting feedback, try as much as you can to take pressure off the process. When you're putting pressure on it, it can really just like kind of put a more barriers to the creativity that you're trying to get to flow. So tap into the messiness because that's where those like light bulb moments and those things that make you feel kind of alive when you're sharing your story can really come out when you give yourself the freedom to like mess up and have it not be perfect right away. Okay, so it's really important that we focus on our boundaries and self-care when we're sharing our stories and when we're crafting them. While sharing your story can be a very empowering experience with, of course, the potential to create real change, it's also essential to acknowledge that it can be very emotionally challenging. We are trying to get our emotions on paper and pull from our emotions. So that in turn can be very emotionally draining. Um, so we like to say, share your scars, not your wounds. You don't have to expose yourself to emotional pain if you're not ready to share certain elements of your story. Basically, only share when you feel ready, when you feel like whatever you are talking about doesn't hurt to go back to. If it still causes you distress, it's perfectly fine to keep that element private for now. And your scars and your wounds might kind of change, or your feelings around them might change over time. It's really important to honor how you're feeling because this is an emotional exercise. So honoring your emotions is really key here. Um, so uh, when and how you share your story is your decision. You're never obligated to share your story. Um, Sharing once doesn't make you obligated to share it again in different circumstances. You have the autonomy to include as many or as few details as you're comfortable with. If you've shared certain details before, that doesn't make you obligated to share them like in the future. And yeah, your narrative can evolve as you do. Um, while sharing your story might offer solace to others, prioritizing your own well-being is really, really, really important. Some days sharing might feel empowering, while on other occasions you might prefer to keep your story to yourself for, self-preservation. When you are sharing difficult aspects of your story, just remember that, um, your feelings are your lived experiences. So you really don't need to relive anything that you don't feel comfortable reliving. Remembering your audience is important in this aspect of story sharing too, um, because maybe some aspects of your story that are emotional don't need to be shared with a specific audience. You might feel more comfortable sharing some aspects with certain audiences and other aspects with a different audience. Similarly, you can also kind of say at the top of your story what you'll be talking about. If you're worried that, certain elements of your story might be uncomfortable to your audience, but you think very impactful and that they sort of need to hear it, you can do something like a trigger warning, just mentioning like what you'll be talking about broadly at the top of your story. That just allows your audience members to have like autonomy over whether they can hear it or not for their own emotional well-being. Um, and then after you share your story, be prepared for the possibility that others may share their stories with you or ask questions. So similarly with this, you only need to respond to inquiries that make you feel comfortable, and be mindful of the emotional weight that somebody else's story may carry if they share it with you. Um, if you find yourself in a conversation where you don't um, feel necessarily like your story is being respected, um, your well-being comes first, and feel free to relay that, and you can take action accordingly. When you're sharing your story, uh, especially if you are sharing it verbally, like recording a video or you know doing an in-person speaking engagement. Some tips here to kind of center yourself before you share your story can be like taking a deep breath, drinking some water, checking in with yourself, making sure that you have some time, maybe alone or with a support person, can really help you just get centered and feel calm before you're participating in an engagement that might be new or maybe daunting to you. Um, some people are, public speaking comes either naturally or they have experience in it, but other people, you might be public speaking for the first time. So making sure you kind of honor yourself in that is really great and can help you just feel more comfortable when you're sharing your story. Um, And yeah, if you are doing a lot of advocacy work, you probably are familiar with burnout, um, specifically advocacy burnout. That comes from like, pouring your emotions into the work you're doing consistently. So building out maybe some longer term self-care can be really important here if this is something you're getting into for the first time. Um, and when you're sharing your story, know that you're not alone. Uh, you know, Obviously, there's quite a few people here that probably have similar stories. So, yeah, just knowing that you are in community, you are with people who, um, or you have people around you who support you can just um, help you feel more sort of whole when you're sharing. So then when you're sharing your story, here are some just like quick tips. So when you're writing them down, and that can come kind of like after your brainstorming. Drafting is great. Reviewing often, taking breaks from it is great. When you're recording, make sure you familiarize yourself with whatever draft you're going with. Um, do multiple takes if you need to. Take your time. Um, when you're speaking, make sure you practice a lot beforehand. Take your time again. But you want your story to feel familiar to yourself when you're sharing it. You don't want to feel foreign to your own narrative. So make sure that you just like get comfortable with it. Practice more than you think you need to, just so that when you are sharing it, it feels like something that is, uh, authentic to you. Um, okay, so now we're gonna open it up, I believe, for questions. Um, and then we're going to get into the win specific opportunity.
All right, so I'll just remind everyone if you have a question for our speaker or for anyone else, please just hop into the um, Q&A and post your questions. I did have an interesting question from someone. I'm sorry, Diane. She said, I'm curious to know if you use Google Notebook LM, like an AI tool, to write stories and what you think of that. She said she has a lot of startups that have a hard time telling their story. So they throw the deck of what they do into a notebook and it creates a video. And she finds that it's generally impressive. So have you ever had any experience with that, or what do you think of that potential possibility?
Um, yeah, I have never used Google's Notebook before, or really any AI tools for crafting stories. So I'm not sure what that really looks like, honestly. I will say, like, if you are looking for like the through lines of sharing your story, like how you get from, the brainstorm to the actual story itself. Um, we tend to, just do drafts and review them with people. And we kind of like in our work really like the messiness that can come with the story. Um, but yeah, I'm really not too familiar with the AI tools, but would love to maybe like hear a story that's been kind of parsed out with one.
That's kind of what I was thinking because I just don't trust AI yet for with either data or my story. So I'd have to try it out and see how how it handled the information. Would it be something that does it sound like me, first of
Yeah.
all, right? And then did it really capture like the emotional aspects of all these experiences? You know what I mean?
Mhm. I'll also say too, kind of like with the last chunk of what I was mentioning, like becoming familiar with your own story and working through those maybe uncomfortable details that you then might be sharing is a very important part of the process. So I would say that like if those tools kind of skip over that and go from point A to point B a little too quickly without having you work through those things, because it is your story, I think that those things are important to work through. Because at the end of the day, you're talking about like your motivation and why you care. So the crunchiness that might come with that and like drawing the connections between what happened and then why you care as a result, I think are really important, especially when you're having like real life conversations about your motivation.
I have a participant, Rebecca, said she's used AI to help her word things. Because if you feel like you're a very emotional person, it can sometimes state things a little more eloquently or in a less triggering way for a certain audience. So that's an interesting aspect. Afreen asks, thank you so much for this presentation. I appreciate you touching on the personal elements of storytelling. Do you have any tips for sharing a story where you suspect your audience might have a contentious response to it? Particularly for a nuclear narrative, there's always dissenters you never know when you're going to run into some dissenter to your idea.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely run into that a lot in, my line of storytelling work as well. I will say, I think it's just that like getting familiar with your story and making sure that you feel comfortable and like that you kind of have that strength within your own narrative is a really good foundation to have. That's not always like completely realistic when you're sharing it maybe for the first time or you're having like initial conversations with people when you're first starting to become an advocate. But I will say that that's a good foundation to have. Um, Second, I think that um, kind of knowing what you want to convey, I think like that ask piece is really, really important because with the centers specifically, they might try to kind of get you off topic. So always being able to circle back to your ask is really important too. Um, the like with opposition and it can really become a kind of a power dynamic or in certain conversations dissenters can try to like kind of have a little more power than you by kind of taking your narrative and uh, maybe spinning it or talking about other things that don't necessarily relate, but just always making sure that you know that you are the expert in your story is really, really essential. The That's why I think that, but just always making sure that you know that you are the expert in your story is really, really essential. The That's why I think that too the emotional aspects of a story, the personal aspects of a story are compelling, and because they are yours, like nobody can change what has happened to you. Your your truth is your own, and I think that that's really important to remember when you are interacting with people who might not feel the same way as you or might not even believe you. Just know that like your truth is what happened to you. So focusing on those aspects and kind of just reiterating that can be a powerful tool. That's usually to the emotional aspects of a story, the personal aspects of a story are compelling, and because they are yours, like nobody can change what has happened to you. Your your truth is your own, and I think that that's really important to remember when you are interacting with people who might not feel the same way as you or might not even believe you. Just know that like your truth is what happened to you. So focusing on those aspects and kind of just reiterating that can be a powerful tool. That's usually what we focus on. I hope that is a kind of answers your question.
feel like it did, and I also feel like it would take some practice to not get distracted.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to go back to your real goal, because it's easy to take the bait.
Yeah.
So,
It's
um,
also important. We like to say, like, you're an expert in your story, but if somebody's asking you a question that you don't know the answer to quickly, like saying I don't know is like also really helpful because um, rather than maybe try to engage with them on something that you are not like confident in or that you feel like is kind of taking attention away from like the thing that you were talking about. Um, just saying like I'm not quite sure, or I don't really know how your question relates to what I was talking about can be really helpful too. You kind of just make sure that you're feeling like you have adequate power in your narrative, and always feel free to circle back to the things that you feel confident in.
I have another question from Zach. He said, "Oh, thank you for your time." He's wondering, do you make an effort to include the audience as a character in a story you're telling? Um, and if you do, like, how much research or background research goes into bringing those people in and to make it feel authentic, do you think?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Oh,
Uh, okay, so from my experience, I think that a knowing your audience is really dependent on like, of course, the engagement and learning as much as you can about just like who will be there, like who's sending out the invites, like is this event open to the public, or is it just like people who support you can really help um, you tailor your story to like focusing on the things that you're comfortable with. Um, I love the idea of implementing them as like a character in the story. If you're talking about um, maybe if for example your audience is full of people who support whatever cause you're talking about, I think that a powerful way to go about creating your story would be like, I had people in my life that, supported me, um, and, you audience members or whomever, like drawing the parallels between people who maybe in your life were supporters and showing how that is reflected in the audience could be really powerful. Um, I really like the idea of like naming them as a character too. That's like not something that we've done a lot of, but I think that's really interesting and can definitely be um, impactful.
I think it's kind of like role play, and maybe it would be especially poignant if you had a physical inner something you're trying to describe physically, and you could have the person be you, and then you play the other
Ooh,
person,
yeah,
which
I
I've
like
done
that.
before because it's hard to for that person to act like something that they haven't seen, but you know what you saw, so you can say, "Hey, pretend you're me,"
I like
and
that.
yeah, I've done it that way before. One
Mhm.
more, but I'm going to pass it to Leanne to present the ask for our story.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning into our webinar today. Again, I hope that you can take the information that Corinne presented to us and you're able to craft your story, right? And what does that mean to you, right? How do you support nuclear or clean energy? Why do you care that a plant is shutting down? How can you support the causes that you believe in, right? How do you support that? Gathering both the heart and the mind, right? So telling the story in both an emotional and factual way. What we would like to do here is challenge each and every one of you to get with your chapter, get with a friend, and record that story. Right, follow the worksheet that we've included in the beginning of the chat here, and it also has a few examples listed that are specific to nuclear. So please take a look at that and put that together and write it up either written, video, audio, and submit it to us at the Winning Edge. So not only use it as your elevator pitch to present about the things that you care about, but also submit it to us at the Winning Edge, and we'll try to share that to a broader audience. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your participation.
Yes, and thank you, Corinne, for doing this for us. I really appreciate you, and I just can't thank you enough. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys. This is awesome.